It's Sunday. It's Gimel Kislev. Gimel Kislev. I just want to mention yesterday was Beis Kislev. Beis Kislev is not the happiest day in Lubavitch. Maybe you think the Meiser. What happened was that we won the case of the Sforim on Hey Tevis, on Chamisha B'Tevis, Tafshin Mem Zayin, 1987, and there was an appeal. And so long as the appeal was going on, the Sforim were kept in the same storage that they were being kept in during the trial. The government took the Sforim based on an injunction that we filed, and even after we won, since they were entitled to an appeal, they didn't give us the Sforim. The appeal was won. In other words, the appellate court threw it out, I think. They refused to hear it, what I understand. Oh, maybe they did hear it. But they agreed with the judge's verdict. Chafei Cheshvan, which is my mother's birthday. So the next Monday was Beis Kislev. That year there were 30 days in Cheshvan, like there was this year. So it was the same day of the week. It was a Monday and a Monday. And apparently, I didn't know this. I mean, I was a Bach in 770. I was actually sitting and learning. I was inside. Don't blame me. My son tells me, but it was Bein Hasdorim. The Rebbe went to the oil during lunch, 2:50, but after 2:15, and it's a good kasha. But anyway, the Rebbe came out to go to the oil, and the Rebbe had in the morning had Chadakov to call the moistas and say Mazolnish Kumen. You know this? Did you know this? The Rebbe gave specific instructions that they shouldn't come to 770. The Rebbe didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I even saw a meine, an answer where the Rebbe wrote about this, that Luchas Harishenis, about the Benegeta making a big deal out of the return of the Sforim. So the Rebbe wrote, Luchas Harishenis Shenitnu Barash Nishtabru, Luchas Shniyas Shenitnu B'Sheket. I forgot the exact wording. Niskaim. The first Luchas were given with a big tumult, they were broken. The second Luchas were given quiet, and they have a kiyum. So the Rebbe wrote, Benegeta the return of the Sforim. So Hey Tevis Mem Zayin was a party for a week that the Rebbe participated in, not Begufei, but Besichoi, right? The Rebbe spoke Siches. And the whole story with going to the oil, and it's an Eisratzen, if you remember. Anyway, the Rebbe came to a lot of people outside. And the Rebbe was really, really upset. This film, this footage, I've seen it. How upset the Rebbe was. I'm a nicht. That was really, 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 really upset. This was Beis Kislev. It was Monday. It was a shake. It was a big tresel. Really was a big tresel. Shabbos was Zayin Kislev. Shabbos Vayetze. And Mot 11 was still alive. Mot 11 was my father's uncle. He lived here for a little while. So after the Fabringen, I met him in the front of 770, and he said to me, his words were, "Das the Rebbe sich übergebeten." He worded it even edler than that, but he said to me, the Rebbe was sort of trying to fix what he did the Monday before. The Rebbe, by the Fabringen Shabbos, softened what happened the Monday before. And Shabbos, the Rebbe said that Eimitz had Bamir gefragt. Somebody asked me, and it's Yadua that it was the Rebbe, and I don't know how it's Yadua. I guess it's Yadua because nobody else could ask such a question of the Rebbe. Then why did they get so upset? It's a simcha from the Siderenu. It's a simcha of the Rebbe, the Shver, the Frierdiker Rebbe of the Rebbe. And the Chassidim wanted to be started from the simcha. So what's the crime? They wanted to see the Rebbe after the oil. It wasn't like every day people did watch the Rebbe leave to the oil. When it was David HaShogun in those years, that people years ago, the Rebbe went to oil, nobody was outside, but it's like Yeshem Weisen Rebbe Mimponim. In the later years, everybody was pushing into the Rebbe's face. It was a regular thing. It was part of the culture at that point. So the Rebbe said, why did I get so upset? And the Tnu of Shabbos was very, very ufgelegt. It wasn't just the words. The Rebbe's mood was very positive. Very, 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 I don't know, it's hard to describe when you feel kiruv, but the Rebbe was very close to Chassidim. And the Rebbe said that he says, ich bin die Dan Notzach. Was made die Dan Notzach? The Dan, the Sforim Notzach. The victory was the victory of the Sforim. And the Rebbe said about himself, als angekommen zurück des Sforim, der erste Sach, habe ich sich weggesetzt, lernen in des Sforim. And the Rebbe said, das ist die Dan. That's what the Rebbe, das ist die Dan. This is the Dan Notzach. To stand and look at a bus of a dome, as the Rebbe called it. So Shabbos, there was a softening of what happened on Monday. That Shabbos also was an interesting sikha. I'm just mentioning this that the Rebbe, what happened was the Sfarim were returned on Monday. The Rebbe was by the oil. And the Rebbe asked that as soon as the Sfarim come back, they should bring a few Sfarim to him, to the Rebbe, to the oil. So Yudel Krinsky, was angry to Rav Yudel Krinsky, he didn't take the Rebbe to the oil that day. Binyamin Klein took the Rebbe to the oil. He was involved with the Sfarim. And he picked up 3 Sfarim. He says he looked at us, he picked 3 Sfarim that he thought were appropriate. And he brought them to the Rebbe by the oil. And he gave it to the Rebbe as the Rebbe was standing by the oil. And when the Rebbe came back at night, and the Rebbe picked up a little sefer and said that they should print it right away. In other words, as a celebration of the Didandat Sfarim, not there was a certain kuntas. The Rebbe picked up a certain sefer that was printed. This sefer hasn't been printed probably in 350 years. It's an old sefer. It's called Derech Hamunah. It's Shalos Tshuvos and Kabbalah from the Mechaber of the Sefer Avedas HaKedesh, Rabbi Meir ben Gabbai. He's a very famous Mekubal. The Friedrich Rebbe says in the Sefer Azachrenis that there's 3 big Mekubalim. 3 big Mekubalim. The first is this Rabbi Meir ben Gabbai. The second is the Ramak, Rabbi Shukor Davidu, and the third is the Arizal. So the Rebbe had, his famous Sefer Avodas HaKodesh has been printed many times. Chassidus quotes Avodas HaKodesh. This other Sefer, he has a Sefer on Tefillah, a very good Sefer on Tefillah called Telas Yaakov. Telas Yaakov, from the same Mechaber, Rabbi Meir ben Gabbai. But he also has a Shalos Tshuvos, or Derech HaKabbalah, is called Derech Hamunah, I think it's called. It's a little booklet, and the Rebbe said they should print it up for Shabbos. They printed it up right away. So before Shabbos, they were selling it. There was a blue pamphlet for $1. Remember? Don't you remember? This is 32 years ago. I forgive you for not remembering, but I was a bachet. This was my whole world. And I was so impressed. The entire Sefer was full of Maram HaKemes. The Rebbe gave it to them Monday after oil. That means they had 4 days to work on it. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So they typed up the Sefer. To type up a Sefer, from a Sefer is nitazei gevelach. It's taka before the days of scanning and letter recognition. But it wasn't such a big Sefer. But they made makbilis in the Sefer to all the Sfarim of the Avodas HaKodesh. For that you have to be baki. Who knows Avodas HaKodesh? Who even owns that Avodas HaKodesh? I was so impressed. And Shabbos, the Rebbe spoke, Vayetze, a whole sicha on the Sefer. Derech Emunah. And it's Rebbe's Magiyah. The Rebbe edited. It's a very, very important sicha. The nakuda of that sicha was, there was other times the Rebbe spoke the same minyan, but this is Muga. The nakuda of that sicha was that everything in Seichel is mevusas on something which is l'mayla min ha-Seichel. That we understand in Yonim of Torah, based on the Yesod, that the Torah comes from the Eibishter, and ultimately, every Seichel begins with something which is above Seichel. Because the Rebbe, the way the Sefer works is he has circular questions. L'mashal, yeah? It says in Medrash, Ma ha-neshama mamalias aguf, kacha HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamalias elam. But it also says, Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamalias elam, kacha ha-neshama mamalias aguf. Make up your mind. The question was about Esses Sfiris. Why there's 10 Sfiris and not 9 Sfiris, not 11 Sfiris? And the Rebbe showed that all of the answers are not good answers. They're only good answers if you accept certain Yesodis before. So the maskana that the Rebbe drew, and I remember the Rebbe, how the Rebbe, he was teaching us. That's the Rebbe, he used to teach. He was teaching us. I remember the way the Rebbe gave it over. The words I don't remember, but the feeling of the Rebbe was teaching us. You have to know that everything in Torah that you understand is predicated on this is what the Eibishter wanted. When it says in Sefer Yetzirah, Esav Elei Teisha, Esav Elei Achadosa, 10 spheres, not 11. 10 spheres, not 9. Why? This is what he wanted. On that Yesod, you can give all the explanations you want, but it always remains higher than Seichel. And that's how the Rebbe resolved this question of which comes first. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mamalias Eilam or the Neshama Malas Haguf. I haven't seen the Sikha in 30 years. But okay, I just wanted to share that. So Beis Kislev is Azam in Sartog. It's nicht von der Freilichste Tag in unser Kalendar, aber man darf es der Monnen. It was Shabbos yesterday. But the Ikir is that after Beis Kislev that there was Ayin Kislev. The Hom the Gula Shleima now. Amen. Okay, Rabbi said we're learning Tanya. We're holding on page Tezvav Amud Aleph, which is page 29. How many lines from the bottom of the page? 5. I think it's 5. Ach, al mailas tzadigomu hushomer ashbi. I think we had 4 classes on this pedic. Very efficient. Der Weile. 4. This tzadik sheini gomor and this tzadik gomor. We started off learning about Tzaddik B'chlal. Then we learned a little bit about Tzaddik Gomor, a little bit. And then the last couple of classes, if I'm not mistaken, we learned about Tzaddik She'enei Gomor and Tzaddik V'ra Loi. The whole vort is how the two are connected. Tzaddik She'enei Gomor and Tzaddik is connected. And I told you last week at the end of the class that in mitzvah from this week, B'li Neder, we're going to go back to Tzaddik Gomor. So the Alter Rebbe is talking about Tzaddik. Tzaddik means V'li b'yicholo b'kirbe ki harge b'tainis. V'li b'yicholo b'kirbe ki harge b'tainis. It's page Tesvav. It's page Tesvav or 29. Yeah. The Hebrew numbers are half the English numbers because the Hebrew goes on the dafim and the numbers go on the amudim. V'li b'yicholo b'kirbe. David HaMelech says it's brought in the Gemara that his heart was hollow within him. Why? Because he killed his Yetzer Hara ki harge b'tainis. He murdered it, killed it. What did Alter Rebbe say in Tanya? Alter Rebbe uses the word memele, which is really not a Hasidic word. Memele means automatic. We don't believe in automatic. But here the Alter Rebbe uses the word memele, and he says that when a person kills his Yetzer Hara completely, it's memele, automatically, it becomes Kedusha. It cannot be in between. If it's not become Kedusha, that's a proof that on some Dakasdika level, it's still Rash Boy. There's something tzaddik, something wrong. Because if a tzaddik completely transformed it into toiv, automatically it becomes toiv. That's called a tzaddik gomor, and this is called tzaddik v'toiv loy, as we discussed at length in the last couple of classes. And one of the interesting constants, one of the interesting, so to speak, halachas, klolim, the Rebbe establishes in this Perek, and it's going to come up later again, whatever it is, Yadalit, I think, Gimel Yadalit, is this idea that ahava and sinna are base kavim shkulim. Love and hate, or he calls it mius, are equal and opposite. Like it says the pasuk, the Alter doesn't bring the pasuk, but you say it Yom Kippur, it's in by Kol Nidre, yeah. Oyevei Hashem, he said Friday night also. Oyevei Hashem sinura. Those who love God, they hate evil, and it goes both ways. Say neira oyevei Hashem, and it's shava b'shava. The love for teif and the hate for evil, or the mias and evil, are equal and opposite. So if a person doesn't love the Eibishter completely, he doesn't hate evil completely. If a person doesn't hate evil completely, he doesn't love evil, good, completely. And conversely, if a person loves Hashem infinitely, his hate for evil is absolute, and vice versa. A person has hate for evil that's absolute, so his love for the Eibishter is absolute, because they're beis kavim shkulim. They're equal and opposite. Okay? The degree of love is the degree of hate. So a tzaddik v'ra loi, because the ra is in him, he can't hate evil completely because he has a connection to ra. So his hate for evil is not complete, his love for good is also not complete. A tzaddik v'toiv loi, since he has transformed the evil into good, like the Alter Rebbe says, memele, so his hate for evil is absolute, and his love for good is also absolute. And I mentioned to you, parenthetically, a vort, that the tzaddik v'ra loi's life is full of fire. The tzaddik v'ra loi has more fire than a beinani, because since he has ra inside, so everything he does has a little bit of an irritation. Yeah, the good that he's trying to do is irritated by the ra. That creates passion. That creates his spoilers. That creates tumult. That creates rash. So if you would look at a tzaddik she'enei gomer, a tzaddik gomer, say, nu werde größer der tzaddik. The tzaddik she'enei gomer macht mit den Händen die Fies und klappt und brennt der Feier. And the tzaddik gomer, like it says by Moshe Rabbeinu, is shah still, kaltenbrand. No tumult whatsoever. Why? Because there's a dvekis. There's no conflict inside. So a tzaddik who hates evil, but not completely, you see that he hates evil. A tzaddik who hates evil completely, it's cold, gleich giltig. It's for right. He's concerned evil doesn't exist, because he has no connection to it whatsoever. And the Rebbe talked about tzaddik v'ra, and he brought the Lashon Gemara. Tamnei ser alfe tzaddikim. There's 18,000 tzaddikim that are kaimi kamei kodesh b'richu, which it's page Tesvav Amanala, page 19, page 29. It's 5 lines from the bottom. There's 18,000 tzaddikim that stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in last week's class, as we were finishing, I mentioned to you Ulukut Sichas for the Rebbe, and this morning I looked over the Sikha again. This is called Dover Cotton by the Rebbe, but the go'oiness of the Rebbe, just how he knows the Torah. The Rebbe takes topics that are so impossible to handle because it's so scattered all over the Torah. It's a word over there and a word over here. It's impossible. The Rebbe owns the Torah like you own your fingers or more, and he pulls it all together and he makes it so simple and so clear. The Rebbe has one sikha where he delineates 5 madregas of tzaddik. It's a collection from Kol HaShas and Kol HaYerushalmi and Kol HaZeir and Kol HaKabbalah and Kol HaMedrashim. Nobody could do this. Nobody. Because you have to be both a Baki and a Charif and a Mason Masik. But once the Rebbe does it, it's like, sure. Anybody, the sikha is printed. All you got to do is read it. The Makkaitis are so scattered to collect them. And the Rebbe had an Indian in doing this. He found excuses to touch topics. People used to ask the Rebbe questions, simple, innocent questions, and the Rebbe sent them a long Megillah, a letter. The Kaisiv never intended. The Rebbe used to use every excuse you gave him to be mavader things that only a Rebbe can be mavader, only the Rebbe can be mavader, with a bekiyus and a yediyah. So the Rebbe Pashat presents to you the sugi of tzaddik. It's in L'kutei Sichos Chelik Daled, 2 pages with the Maram HaKemis. You look at the Ha'aretz. 5 madregas of tzaddik. What are the 5 madregas of tzaddik? The first madrega is called these 18,000 tzaddikim, but 18,000 is really a mystical number. I would imagine that there's a lot more than 18,000. 18,000 could be in one generation even, not in our times, but in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu and Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, there were many tzaddikim. That are Pashat big in neshamas. The first level is 18,000. The second level is Lamed Vav tzaddikim, 36 tzaddikim. The third level is called Bnei Aliyah, those people who are on the Madrega of Aliyah, which we're going to be talking about today. And the fourth and the fifth are Tzaddik Yesei De'elam. The Tzaddik is the foundation of the world. Tzaddik Yesei De'elam is only one. Bnei Aliyah could be more than one, but the Gemara says Muatim, there's not a lot of them. So you have 5 levels of Tzaddik. Tanei said Alpha Tzaddikim, 18,000 Tzaddikim. You have Lamed Vav Tzaddikim. Then you have Bnei Aliyah, which could be more than one. And then in Tzaddik, you say the Olam, you have 2 levels. So I think I misspoke last week. Today I did a lot of more reading it. The first 2 levels are Tzaddik She'eini Gomer. The 18,000 Tzaddikim is Tzaddik She'eini, not perfect. In other words, their love for Hashem is not complete, and their hate for evil is not complete. And even the second level, Lamed Vav Tzaddikim, the Rebbe says it's also Tzaddik She'eini Gomer, and he brings it from the Tanya, actually from our Pedic. What's the difference between the first level and the second level? The 18,000 tzaddikim or Aili Babad, they can only go in with Rishus. The Lamed Vav tzaddikim can also only go in with Rishus. Aili Babad means they could go into the Eibish's Rishus only if they have Bar. Bar means food, Haber. Bar means Mitvua. But contextually it means that you're bringing a good reason to approach the Eibush. You can't just come in, you have to be prepared, Ali B'lei Bar, you can go in anytime you want. And you don't believe the Shus, you just go into the Melech. What's the difference? The difference is that the 18,000 tzaddikim are called Aspaklaria She'eina Me'ira. They have Ruach HaKodesh. A tzaddik has Ruach HaKodesh, they can see a Lukus. But by a tzaddik She'eina Gomor, his Ruach HaKodesh is Aspaklaria She'eina Me'ira. Aspaklaria means a tool for seeing, a glass for seeing. Aspaklaria She'eina Me'ira means a looking glass that doesn't have light. Looking as it doesn't have light. What that means in Pnimius is a tool that allows you to see, but you only see indirectly. You don't see direct, you see like a mirror. You see an image, you see a picture of the original. So the 18,000 tzaddikim and the 36 tzaddikim, I have to correct myself, both of them are only Aili Babad. They can't go into the Shus HaKadosh Baruch Hu without Hachana, preparation. The difference is that the 18,000 tzaddikim are Aspaklaria, they see a Lukus indirectly, and the Lamed Vav tzaddikim they have Aspaklaria Hameira, they see a Lukus directly, but even they only can go in with Rishus, Aili Babad. So those 2 are levels of Tzaddik She'eini Gomer, 18,000 and then there's 36. Then there's 3 levels in Tzaddik Gomer. The first is called Bnei Aliyah, which could be more than one. And the 4th level, the 5th level is Tzaddik Yesei De'elam. The Alter Rebbe doesn't talk about the fourth level and the fifth level. I'm assuming he doesn't talk about it because no one needs to read it. It's the Rebbe Negei, it's not anybody else's business. He mentioned it in Perek Aleph. Ra'isi b'nei aliyah shei muatim. Omar v'shazor l'shane'amar v'tzadik yiseid elam in the first Perek. But here it doesn't mention it. I just want to tell you, because I have a hearts for this. What's the difference between the first level of Tzadik Yiseid Elam and the second level of Tzadik Elam? The first level of Tzadik Yiseid Elam is like a very big Tzadik and all good Zachen, but he's not Megin al Bnei Derek. He's not in a high enough Madrege that, but push it because he's on this earth. The whole dot has a Shmina. It's two Madreges in Tzadik Yiseid Elam. The higher Madrege is by Chizkiyahu HaMelech, and Rabbi Bayachoy, and Rabbi is kein Suffolk nicht. Beim Rebbe, he protects the generation. Pashat, a Yid gefindt sich an der Shama v'guf in der Welt. How do you understand the difference between one Tzadik Yiseid Elam and a different Tzadik Yiseid Elam? But Pashat is Mogin or Matzel, he protects his whole generation. Rashi brings in Pashas Neach that in the generation of Chizkiyahu HaMelech and the generation of Shem Bayachoy, there was no keshes, there was no rainbow. And the way it's understood in the Pneumis Term, it's not because all the people were so righteous, because Chizkiyahu HaMelech and Ashbi were Megan Abnei Derem. It's an even higher Madrege in Tzadik Yiseid Elam. Anyway, so the Tanya discussed last week briefly these two levels of Tzadik She'einei Gomor, 18,000 Tzadikim, which is called Asbaklaria She'eina Me'ira. They don't see clearly, you don't see directly. And then the Lamed Vav Tzadikim, they're also Tzadikim She'einam Gemurim. They're not perfect tzaddikim. They have a shaykhis tarah, but aspaklaria me'ira, they can see clearly. Then we get to Tzaddik Gomer. Tzaddik Gomer loves Hashem completely. He has a cold and an absolute hate for Ra. That's what makes him a Tzaddik Gomer. Yeah. So we read inside now. Let's read it inside. Okay. Says the Rebbe. Who helped me? However. 5 lines from the bottom of page Tes Vov Amar Aleph. Yeah, is it right, or am I giving you a wrong number?
Right.
Al Mailis Tzaddik Gomer. When you talk about a Tzaddik Gomer, you should know who Sha'omar Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. This is a Gemara that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, Ra'isi b'nei Aliyah v'hei Muatim v'cholu. Rav Shimon says, I see that there's a category of Yid called b'nei Aliyah. B'nei Aliyah means Hechana mentioned, tied to the word b'nei Aliyah. B'nei, technically, children who live in the attic, like B'nei Aliyah, they're in a higher madrege. They're higher than everybody else. So Rashbi says, I examined the B'nei Aliyah, and I see there are very few v'chulu, right? And the way the Gemara continues is, Im shnayim heim, aniyu b'ni, if there's 2 B'nei Aliyah, it means me and my son, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, and if there's only 1, anihu, Rashbi says. That's how the Gemara goes. Yeah? If there's 2, it's me and my son. If there's only 1, it's me. And of course the shaila becomes, was for a tzaddik zogt of sich? Ich ben a tzaddik, und to dov dem a hez berechet. If Shimon says, if there's only 1, it's me. If Shimon says about himself.
Said Rav Shimon was tzaddik Yiseid Elam. It's a different madrege.
Akasha for mice. Okay, Akasha. What's the Akasha? Chabish kateretz. Akasha. Okay, I'm not going to argue.
You just said it.
Yeah, of course I said it. I didn't say that. I said, look at the sikhs. I repeated the sikha for you. But yeah, it's a question. Deserves an answer. So B'nei Aliyah could be more than 1, but there's not a lot of them. B'nei Aliyah is a very B'nei Aliyah Tzaddik Gomer. Now what the Rebbe points out in this Sikha is that from the wording of the Tanya, it's clear that B'nei Aliyah is automatically a Tzaddik Gomer, and Tzaddik Gomer is automatically B'nei Aliyah. In other words, it's not. There's no in between. If you're a Tzaddik Gomer, you're a B'nei Aliyah or a Ben Aliyah, and if you're a Ben Aliyah, you're automatically a Tzaddik Gomer. Now, if you hear Friday was a Shchedish, so I started a Shir with the Zohar. If you hear Friday, I wasn't here Thursday. It says it was a Shchedish. I was away. So Friday I had my Maimer crowd. I didn't have a Shchedish Kislev crowd. But in the beginning of the Shir, I read a Zohar. It's a Moedendik Zohar. Benegay to the story with the Rebbe, with the Shchedish Kislev. And part of the story is that Rabbi goes Lamaila. Rabbi goes Lamaila. Why did Rabbi go Lamaila? The way the story starts is Rabbi is talking about his Rebbe who had passed away, Rabbi Shimon. And it says in the Zohar that at first he said that Rabbi Shimon is Bola Ara. He was swallowed up by the earth. And even though Bola Ara ikayim umanegalma, he's still alive. This is in the Zohar. Ikayim umanig alma. He's still alive and he's still governing the world. Then it says, Ishtoim, I forgot the lashon. Ishtoimim shait rigeh chada. He became confused for a moment. Ishtoimim rigeh chada. Sometimes it says shait chada, it says rigeh chada, which means Rab Chia became confused for a second. And it's brought in Chassidus that hishtoimimos, confusion, is a means to go from one level of chachma to a second level of chachma. And after the rega of Rab Chia's hishtoimimos, Rab Chia says, Ara, loit is God. He was speaking to the earth. He says, don't be a balgaive, because Rab Shimon Bar Yochai is not in the ground. You understand? Rab Shimon Bar Yochai is not in the ground. So at first he said, Rashbi is in the ground, but then, Ikayim, Umanig Alma. He's living and he's governing the world. And then he has a aliyah, Rab Chia does, in Seichel, and he says, no, he's not in the ground. When Rab Chia came to that conclusion, so Rab Chia says, I want to go see him. And he had a chaver with him, Rabbi Yossi, and the two of them fasted for 40 days, and at the end of the 40 days, they said to him, sorry, sir, we're not letting you in. So he fasted 40 more days. After the second 40 days, they let him in. And what does he find? Rab Shimon Bar Yochai sitzt in Gan Eden und gibt a shir. He's giving a shir. And there's thousands of neshamas listening to his shir. What is he saying? He's saying that Dvar Teire, that Rabbi Yossi, who was a neshama beguf, said on the previous page in the Zohar. You understand? Rab Shimon Bar Yochai sits in Gan Eden. Rashbi is sitting in Gan Eden, and he's chazering a Teire that Rabbi Yossi said in Elam Haza Agash V'Chumri. This is what the Zohar says. And Rabbi Chia comes into the scene. There's a whole bunch of people, and as they're sitting there, Malachim come along to take them from one Gan Eden to another Gan Eden, and it's described as climbing on wings and flying up like in an elevator. And Rabbi Chia goes along to the higher floor, to Gan Eden Elyon. When it comes to the Gan Eden Elyon, so they say, who's this guy? Who gave Mishnah come? Mi Yala Barad Hashem. Who has a right to come into Gan Eden Elyon? And the answer is, someone's hands are clean, his heart is pure, could come to Gan Eden Elyon. That pasuk is quoted in this Zohar, that Rab Chia goes into Gan Eden Elyon, and they let him in. And what's important is that it's quoted in our Tanya. The last two lines of this page is that Zohar. It's the mamish word for word the Zohar from this story. Yeah, but Segeri to the Shchedish Kislev. I'll read them in order. I'm going to get to them. The story of Shchedish Kislev has a quote that will the Shimon Yochai take it. I mean, took it from the Tanya, but right? The Shimon Yochai saw that it says in Tanya these two lines. He copied them and put them into the Zohar. Yeah? That it says in Zohar. They asked, who is this Rab Chia that is coming into Gan Eden Elyon? And the answer is, he's a Ben Aliyah. He's a tzaddik gomer. He transformed his rat to toiv completely. Like I said to you in the beginning of this page, it says memele. It's automatically. So the Rosh Chodesh Kislev story in the Zohar is poshet the Tanya that we're learning today. Ba'ashgacha pratis. That Rab Chia was the madrega of a Ben Aliyah. He was a tzaddik gomer, totally transformed the evil into good, and therefore he was not only able to go into Gan Eden, he was able to go into higher Gan Edens. And of course, the rest of the story is Sefreilach Dorten. Mashiach shows up, and Nechiah, all the important personalities come over there. The descriptions are very hard to understand. And at the end of the story, says Shimon Yochai, Mashiach says to Rabbi, what do you bring him here? He has Moda Dahu Alma. He's wearing clothing of Elam Hazeh. So Reb Shimon says, no, this is Rab Chia. Rab Chia is Taka Neshama Beguf, but he doesn't have such limitations because he's a tzaddik gomer. And Mashiach says, good, let him sit. And he sits. And there's a fabrengen. And at the end of the fabrengen, Reb Shimon says to Mashiach, Zimni Yahavulei, give him years. So the Zohar says, Yahavulei Zimni, they gave him years. And then Rab Chia left. And there's a couple more lines describing Rab Chia's spoilers, Rab Chia's reaction to this experience. This was the story that the Rebbe was Metzayin, Benegate himself, in Tav Shalom Ches. That's the word. But it starts with Rab Chia, Ishtoim Mimrige Chode, and saying, Ara, loit is goi, because that Namuda de Yalma, Muda no loy is Baal and Bach. He's poshet not in the ground. And then Behem Shechlazeh, Rab Chia says, I guess you could put words in Oy Bazoi, if he's not in the ground, I'm going to go find him. And he takes Rabbi Yossi. It looks like Rabbi Yossi was deposited in one of the bus stations. They didn't let him go along for the ride. Rabbi Yossi was it was Rabbi Yossi's Torah. It was Rabbi Yossi's Torah that Rabbi Shimon is repeating. But as the story progresses, Rabbi Yossi falls out. He's no longer just a B'chia. So upon him, Rabbi Yossi didn't let in. So this is called Tzaddik Gomer. Tzaddik Gomer means B'nai Aliyah. It's automatic. B'nai Aliyah and Tzaddik Gomer are synonyms. And the meaning of a Ben Aliyah means he's totally transformed his evil into good. And like I said, at the beginning of this Perek it says, Memele. Memele. If you transform your evil into good, your bad becomes holy. It's like you have two Nefesh Elokis, yeah? Now, just to say, full disclosure, I have to say this every week. Anish b'nechnish yetza ashir. The quote that has to be repeated is the following. That you have to understand the connection between the two terms, Tzaddik Gomor and Tzaddik V'Tev Lei. Tzaddik Gomor means a perfect Tzaddik, which means he loves Hashem infinitely. Tzaddik V'Tev Lei means that his hate for evil is total. Why? Because in him there is only Tev. If in the Tzaddik there is some Ra, Tzaddik V'Ra Loi, so his hate for evil is not complete. Pardon me. And automatically his tzidkis, his tzaddik is einei gomer. His love for the Eibush is incomplete. But by a tzaddik gomer, since his evil was transformed into good absolutely, so he's a tzaddik gomer, means he loves Hashem infinitely, and he's a tzaddik v'toiv loi, since in him there's only good, his hate for evil is absolute, and this is called a ben aliyah. This is called a tzaddik gomer. So read it inside. Achal mailas tzaddik gomer. On the level of a tzaddik gomer, Hu sha'omar Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, and I quote, Re'isi b'nei aliyah. I examined the people who live on the higher floor. Higher tzaddikim. V'hei mu'atem, and they're very few. Says the Rebbe, Shalachei nikroyim b'nei aliyah. The reason they're called b'nei aliyah is shemahapchim hara. They have transformed the evil. Umaylam Ace of the Gedusha and transformed it into holiness. And again, I'm going to put a word into the Alter Rebbe's Tanya because the Alter Rebbe used it a page before. The word memele. It's automatic. If you totally kill evil, it has to become good. There's no such thing as evil dead, which is not transformed into good. And he brings to the Isa Bezeyer Ba'agdama, like it says in the Agdama. This is the story Taka B'negei to the Shchedish Kislev. Shekesherotza Rab Chia Lalis V'Heyecha Rab Shimon bar Yochai. Rabbi Chia wanted to ascend into the chamber of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, but in the story you learn that he met Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in a lower madreg, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was chazening a Torah that Rabbi Yossi, who was in a Neshama B'guf, said. And then along came the elevator, wings, gatfin, malachim with wings, big wings, and they all climbed on the malachim, and they went up, and Rabbi Chia also climbed on the malachim. So there became a shayla, who qualifies Rabbi Chia to go to higher madregas of Gan Eden. And it says these words, Shama kola nafik v'yama. But here, here's a voice that emerges and says, Man min chayin, anybody amongst you, that has successfully transformed darkness into light. Turn to page Tezvav now, 30 now. V'tamim merida, lemiska, and transform the taste of bitterness to sweetness, ad le'yesin ha'chavachulu, before you come here. So the way the Rebbe explains it, that the meaning of these words is that if you have successfully transformed darkness to light and successfully transformed bitterness to sweetness, then you can come here. But if you haven't, then you shouldn't. You shouldn't. And I guess the word is not only you shouldn't, you can't. The Pasha not going to let you in. Yeah. So these two words, the chasheicha mahapchon l'neheda, that transform darkness into light. Vitamin merid, on the taste of bitterness and miskin, the sweetness of the eisen hachan. I want you to know that the Rebbe has a sikha. The Rebbe has a letter where he writes that these are two levels. Transforming chasheicha l'neheda is one level, and transforming merida l'miska is another level. And there's different ways of explaining them, but one of them is, the Rebbe says like this, that mahapach and chasheicha l'neheda is the Torah that you bring into the world to illuminate the darkness of the world. Mahapach time merida l'miska, says the Rebbe, zehu inyan smeichim b'yisurim. The Rebbe brings that the madrege of merida l'miska is smeichim b'yisurim, and the Rebbe argues that Mahapchen Merida Lemiska is a higher level than Chasheicha L'Heira, but there's so many different pshatim, and the pshatim go in various different directions. Okay, that's it. We read how many lines? 5. How many lines did we read? Yeah. We turned the page. Yeah. What did we describe? We described the Indian of a tzaddik gomur, who's the tzaddik v'tevlei, who's called b'nei aliyah, who's in such a transparent, such a clear state that based on the story you have in Zayar, even a neshama beguf is free to sojourn into the Gan Eden Elyon as Rabbi does, and so forth and so on. Now there's two dots. Yeah? Inside the Tanya there's two dots. And then the Alter Rebbe says, Ve'eid nikroyim b'nei aliyah. But there's another reason why they're called b'nei aliyah. Now this another reason, this second reason, this is gor gewaldig. This is a whole different idea. Now obviously I'm not teaching it to you today, I don't have time. But I want to finish this class with a segue for this, which we'll be able to do next Sunday. And it's a story in Sipur, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe Sichos, and I hope I tell it correctly. It's always important to tell stories correctly, but this is again not just in the details of the story, it's again in the pshat of the story. The story was that there was a Fabrengen in the time of the Rebbe Maharash, the 1870s, times of the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe's father, the Rebbe Rebbe's father, yeah, the Rebbe calls him the Schwerzvater, the Rebbe Nishmas Yedin, the Schwerzvater, said about himself that he did not go to Chassidish Verbrengenischen. The Rebbe Rashab said about himself that he did not do Chassidish Verbrengenischen, but it wasn't, nicht weil ich habe sich gefeuert, it wasn't because I was lazy, weil ich bin gelegen in Chassidus allein, I was busy with Chassidus itself, with Teire and Avodah, habe ich nicht gehabt, kein Zeit, für was arum Chassidus is. This is what the Rebbe Rashab said. I didn't have time for what's around Chassidus. And the Frierdiker Rebbe tells a remarkable story that years later, when the Rebbe Rashab decided that he wants to be Mechanech and Madrich, the Frierdiker Rebbe, he realized that he was missing. There was something that he needed to give his son, he didn't have. So he went to the oil of the Rebbe, the Marash, and Tzemach Tzedek, and he said to the oil, do waste. He said to the oil, you know that this that I don't have, this shleimus of Sipurei Chassidim and Sipurim for the Tzadikim, is nicht weil ich habe sich gefeuert, it wasn't from laziness, not weil ich mich gelegen in Chassidus allein. Ich will haben dem shleimus euch. I think I'm telling the story correctly. I want to have this shleimus also. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said that Keshet, to this trip to the oil, there was a shino in his anhaga. The seder by the Rebbe Rashab was that the Frierdiker Rebbe could knock on his door and walk in without waiting for permission. That's the kind of relationship they had. The Rebbe Rayat would knock on the door and just walk in. After this trip to the oil, the Rebbe said that you have to knock on the door and you have to wait for me to say Arayin. You can't come in until I let you in. And the Rebbe Rayat said that after that, my father started telling me stories that I never heard from him before. And I never asked them where he got them from. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, I connected these stories together. Yeah, okay. So the Rebbe Rashab did not go to many Chassidish Fabrengenischen. Naturally, if the Rebbe Marash had a Fabreng, the Rebbe was there, but it says that the Rebbe Marash, even Chassidus was bekitzer. The Rebbe Marash zeitig was very tight. The Rebbe Marash was valued every minute. So everything was very quick. So the Fabrengen could also be an hour, a Fabrengen. But there were some Fabrengenischen, apparently, that the Rebbe Rashab did go to. Because this is a story the Frierdiker Rebbe tells in detail, in very great detail. I think it's in Sefer HaSichos. Tov Shin, there was a Fabrengen amongst Chassidim, and the Rebbe Rashab was there, he was a younger man. And the question that was raised is, what is a Chassid? What is a Chassid? I always tell you this, that the Rebbe came to America, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and in the Sichos, he went back to Aleph Beis. You start reading the Frierdiker Rebbe Sichos from America. That's where you should start. Because the very first Sichos, he asks, what's a Chassid? And what's Chassidus? You see that the Rebbe is, Mama's going back to Aleph Beis. What is a Chassid? It's a whole long arichas, Pesach, I think, Tov Shin in Lakewood. So the Rebbe asked, so the Fabrengen, and Chassidim were talking amongst themselves, what is a Chassid, or what's a Chassidus? It's very, very rich. Anyway, when it came to the question of what is a Chassid, there were different people, and each one gave his day. And it says in the Sikha who said what. I think that Azor spoke, there was a Greisa Chassid of Gershon Ber, he spoke, maybe somebody else, and the Rebbe Rashab also said his day. What did the Rebbe Rashab say? The Rebbe Rashab said, a Chassid, the Debas is zugebunden zum Rebbe, aber zugebunden zu der Peulis von Rebbe. A chassid is someone who is connected to his Rebbe, but specifically he's connected to the activities of the Rebbe. It's what the Rebbe wants done. The Peulis von Rebbe. So they had this Fabrekin. Everybody said his day, and they couldn't decide who's right. So they collected all the days and they brought them to the Rebbe Maharash. But they didn't tell the Rebbe Maharash who said what. They simply presented that this chassid said, that one chassid said kach v'kach, another chassid said kach v'kach, and they asked the Rebbe Maharash to be the referee to decide which of these opinions is the most precise. So when they repeated to the Rebbe Maharash what the Rebbe Nishma Seiden said, he was a younger man, that a chassid is eine was zugebunden zum Rebbe, nor zugebunden to the Peulis von Rebbe. So the Rebbe Maharash said, das hat gesagt a tiefer pnimi. The Rebbe Maharash, you can't fool him, you understand? Said right away, I don't know who said this, but whoever said this, this is the real thing. Das hat gesagt a tiefer pnimi. Because this is the line, this is the line, yeah? You have in Tanya, the highest madrega of Avedis Hashem. Perek Dalet, Perek Hey, Lishma. The highest madrega. We learned it. I gave you speeches on this, long speeches. It's a chazoreh. What's such Lishma? Lishma means lekashe nafshe v'daite v'vayr. Lishma means I learn and I daven to become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there's a very, very different Lishma. And the different Lishma is, as the expression is, that yem yem, of was men darf dir. Nicht was du darfst, nor of was men darf dir. The higher Lishma is not that through this avoida I become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but through this avoida I serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, I do for the Eibishter Kvayocha what the Eibishter needs me to do for him. And that's what the Rebbe Nishma Seiden that had. That the others maybe didn't that had. The Rebbe Rashab understood that the ultimate end of Chassidus is not how close I am to the Eibishter. That's very, very important. If you have no relation with the Eibishter, ich mein, mit was bist da shliach. But at the end of it all is that we serve. We serve. So all the others, and I forgot what the others said, they spoke about a chassid who was working on himself and he's achieving a certain shleimus, for lack of words, in his avodas Hashem, and his degas nakadosh Baruch Hu, and his bidin amidis, and his avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, and his sagav alakus, and all these other wonderful things. What the Rebbe added, the Rebbe Rashab added, that there is a Rebbe, and he has peulas, things that needs to get done. And the Rebbe in his peulas, this is Moshe Rabbeinu, this is what the Eibishter needs to get done. And a chassid who's somebody who's dedicated to that. And this is why the Rebbe Maharash said, Das HaGelok Atifa Pnimi. Because it's mamish turning a corner. It's a whole other thing. Why? Because there's getting close to the Eibishter, there's getting close to the Eibishter, getting closer to the Eibishter. The Rebbe says in one of the ha'aras here, a person gets so close to the Eibishter, he can't get any closer because he's one with the Eibishter. And then there is serving the Eibishter. And that's what's going to happen now. After these two dots, yeah? There's another reason why it's called Bnei Aliyah, and it's not two different types of it. The Rebbe Rashab, in his Maimorim, I read the footnote, I spent a lot of time preparing this morning, says that there's two madregas in Bnei Aliyah. The lower madrega of Bnei Aliyah is about his own shleimus, and the higher madrega of Ben Aliyah is that he serves. But in the Rebbe's ha'aras, it seems that they're the same. The Rebbe Rashab splits them into two levels. A lower madrega and the first reason is that Ben Aliyah means I was mahapech ha'sheich l'heidem and tam menidel l'miske. Tzadik Gomor. I mevader myself totally. The second Ben Aliyah is of service. The Rebbe seems to say that it's automatic. The same memela yet in the beginning of the Pedic. If somebody was mahapech ha'sheich l'heidem menidel l'miske, and that's what we're going to learn next week in Mitzvah Hashem. This other idea. And the expression is Ezehu chosid ha-mischased im koinei. What's a chosid? The same expression. Vos is a chosid? Ezehu chosid ha-mischased im koinei z'may mechazal. And it's the Rebbe Rashab said that's a chosid. Ha-mischased im koinei means what does the Eibishter need from me? There's two types in the word koinei. The first title, the word koina means with my maker. Ezehu chassid. What's a chassid? Hamischasadim koina. It does chesed to the one who created him. The Eibishter needs me, Kvayachol, for his service. The second title of Ezehu chassid koina is imkandile. Kan means a nest, where I live. Ezehu chassid hamischasadim kandile does a kindness with the world in which he lives. That's even deeper. Because what is the mischasadim koinai? How do you serve your maker? By bringing him into your nest, into your world. And we'll do this next week, okay? We'll do this next week. And Mirza Hashem b'li neder. And the B'Shalom will actually finish the Pedic next week. Okay, we're going to breathe and then we're going to do Hayam Yem. Okay, thank you all for coming. And I have to say every single day, Yossi mima shapara eisa me'egel ha'egel eisa bapara. Okay, good morning, everybody.